I am supposed to contact the superintendent for the high school and figure out what's going on.
The Higley School District at that time, they had quite a few new schools going up. This community was developing very quickly.
They were building out of control. This was one of the fastest growing school districts in the country at the time. I call the superintendent. She's explaining that the Higley High School was going through an audit. A very disturbing thing came out of this audit that she needs to bring to law enforcement's attention. They're not exactly sure just how far it goes yet, but it is definitely criminal in nature. We think there's potentially over $1 million worth of damage.
And we're following some breaking news right now. Former Higley Unified School District Superintendent Denise Birdwell has been indicted on 18 felony counts.
They want the school board superintendent out. This morning, we're learning more about the issues facing this very large school district.
I'm absolutely blown away by all of this. This is deeper and more nefarious than I could ever think it would be.
Welcome to Socialite Crime Club. What kind of out of this world story do we have for socialites today?
Today we're going to talk about Arizona's harsh stance on illegal aliens.
I said out of this world, not out of this country.
I know, and I'm sure we probably triggered a handful of people with the term illegal aliens, but I assure you it is the correct term because we're talking about illegal aliens from outer space. So I see you're dressed a little casual today.
Yeah, we both are. Well, it's because we have travel coming up right after this. As soon as we leave the studio, we've got to hit the airport.
Yeah, we got to jump on a plane.
I even have my little tennies on today because I got to walk through the airport real fast.
Yeah, and I wanted to chat about this really quick because I do think this is something that dramatically separates our podcast, our show here from others out there. Is we're actually traveling this week, flying to a unnamed location to work on an active unnamed case. Mm-hmm. But we are very much actively still working criminal investigations. And I think that goes a long way to some of the storytelling that we get to, because we're not just armchair quarterbacking things. We're actually telling stories from a firsthand perspective.
And we also really try to give our socialites a lot of perspective into how the investigations that we work are processed. And we try to drop educational hints to our socialites of how it is that we investigate the things that we do, so that as we move forward with cases in the future, you have a better understanding of what's happening and how we do it.
And you gave me a free pass to dress down today, which is always good.
I did.
Thanks.
Well, I gave myself a free pass to dress down today, too.
Perfect. Okay, let me go back and clean up the illegal alien claim.
Okay.
Because I know we're going to get a lot of hate in our comments on that.
Sure.
Where I pulled that was there's an actual article on a website called governing.com. And what this website is all about is if you're in the government and you run some type of a government program, it's kind of like a clearinghouse for news stories and different policies and procedures to help you out.
Sure.
In April of 2010, one of their reporters, a John Bunton, wrote a really interesting article where he used the headline of Arizona's harsh stance on illegal aliens, but the outer space kind.
Oh.
And it's about this case.
Okay.
So that's where we pulled that from.
I like the little alien image you use there.
Yeah, we'll have to throw that up there.
He's cute.
I got it just for you to say.
He even has a little puppy belly.
He's friendly.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a series of crimes we're actually going to talk about today. They're all pretty low level. Today's a cheeky, fun episode. It's not harsh. It's not deep. Next week is going to hurt. It's going to be hard to get through. This week, we're going to keep it very light. But there are a series of crimes that leads up to the bigger crimes. So we're going to go all the way back to the early 1990s, somewhere in the United States. I'm not going to disclose where. And I'm going to change a few details and names because this case went unsolved. There has never been an arrest. The suspects / culprits have never been identified. And I'm about to identify at least one of them for the first time in over 40 years.
Oh my gosh. Okay. This is interesting. I'm wondering why they were never prosecuted or
because
identified.
it was a perfectly executed crime. Can you get away with a perfect crime? Yes, you can.
You know what? I think I'm following you now.
Yeah. So the statute of limitations is probably up. I need to be careful with this. So it's important that we clean this up. So small town nowhere. And I'm going to give you a little backstory that's probably going to frustrate you a little bit.
Okay.
Around this kid's, and I'm not going to name him either, he's an athlete, pretty good athlete. And in between his 8th grade and freshman year, he actually gets convicted of raping a fellow classmate, a legitimate sexual assault. And he gets sentenced to serve juvenile time in juvenile detention.
Okay.
around his senior year, or what would be his senior year, there's a big push at this school to have him released back to his family under really intense supervision and allow him to play football, where the football coach will help supervise his probation terms, because getting him out of jail and back on the football team will be a positive influence to him.
Now, I think it's probably important to tell our socialites that this is a heavily religious community as well. It's a very small community, and everybody knows everybody in this community, and it is almost cultish in a way that the way political things work in this community.
I will say the superintendent, the principal, and the football coach are all part of the same church, as well as the juvenile who is trying to get out of juvenile detention for a rape. Mm-hmm. It happens. They release him, and he comes back his senior year and plays football. So we have a convicted sex offender who raped a fellow classmate who is now being reintegrated into the high school so he could play football.
Go on. Carry on.
A few months later, our student body president at the same high school happens to be a female. Very good female, straight A student, absolute perfect student with one flaw that kind of comes up, and it's just if you even look at it as a flaw, she got pregnant. So about halfway through her senior year, she gets pregnant. The same principal who thought it was okay to bring the convicted rapist onto the football team decided she was a bad look for the school and made her resign from the president role and basically kept her from social view because they don't want a pregnant female representing the school in any capacity.
I really hope karma has come around to that principal.
Well, this is setting up what's happening. He was hated. There was a lot of angst and just issues with this guy.
Okay.
So a group of unnamed students decided they're going to get some revenge for this. And they devise a plan that will later become known as Goatgate.
Okay.
So Goatgate was very simple. This principal has a whole bunch of goats.
Okay.
The idea is to steal a goat and lock it into the school over the weekend with food and water to see how much of a mess, because, goats eat everything.
Yeah.
How much destruction will this goat do over the weekend when it's locked into the school?
How do you steal a goat?
I'm going to plead the fifth.
You stole the goat.
I didn't steal shit, but the only problem that this band of rejects was having is how to get access to the school in the middle of the night.
Okay.
Because it's locked down.
Okay.
So they need a key. They elicit the help of a teacher, a fellow teacher who also doesn't like this principal.
Oh.
And we will name the teacher.
Okay.
A Mrs. Denise Birdwell, volleyball coach. She also teaches video production. You know how those video production people are.
Oh, I know.
She decides to accidentally leave her master key on the desk one day, and maybe one of these rejects happened to pick it up. So Goatgate is now a success. They have the key. They know where the goats are. Not only did they steal the goat, they rode the goat to school.
Oh my gosh.
The principal only lives about a half mile away, and they actually rode the goat from the principal's office to the school, or his house to the school.
I imagine that would take some level of skill.
Oh yeah, these were very talented goat thieves. And it was a complete success. That goat destroyed the science wing, tore it up.
Wait, you just let it go in the entire science wing?
Yeah, we locked it in the science wing. Oh, did I say we? I mean, they locked it in the science wing. We gave it food and water, though, because we didn't want it to starve.
Of course not.
There was a glass partition, and when we left, it was ramming the glass partition. I think it actually broke the glass partition.
This poor animal.
Oh, no, he had a great time. We fed him all kinds of good food. He probably had the weekend of his life.
You hit the vending machine before you guys left for it?
Yeah, he was in good shape.
Okay.
It was funny because on Monday, when students were coming to school, the cops were out front, animal control was out front. There was a goat tied to the flagpole, the principal standing out front all upset. It was actually pretty.
His own goat was tied to the flagpole?
Yeah, they had finally rescued it.
That's awesome. Well, I guess that's what he gets, right?
Yeah. So it was a simple plan. Everything played out. It was actually really nice. Now we're going to fast forward 17 years. Okay. I am a sergeant with the police department over our violent crimes unit.
Okay.
And it's probably important that I clarify something really quick. Typically, in most police departments, your violent crimes unit is your detectives, your investigators with the most experience. So not only do they catch violent crimes, but if there's a really high profile case or a very sensitive political type case, or there's something like, we got to make sure we get this one right.
Very high profile.
It usually goes to your violent crime people. So I'm fat, dumb, and happy, like I'm saying, sitting in my office when my commander comes in and explains he's got a case I need to look at.
Okay.
But it's a high profile case, which immediately I'm just give me a good homicide. I don't want a high profile nonsense case. So there's a big bugaboo going on apparently at the Higley High School. And I am supposed to contact the superintendent for the high school and figure out what's going on. Some type of a tech issue. And the commander, this was Commander Blaine.
What year are we in right now?
2009.
So the Higley School District at that time, they had quite a few new schools going up because in this community was developing very quickly.
Yeah, they were building out of control. This was one of the fastest growing school districts in the country at the time. So my commander, old school, just old school hard charger cop. I don't know what it is. Something about IT computer stuff. Just figure it out. So he gives me the phone number to the superintendent. I call the superintendent, at which point she identifies herself as
Denise Birdwell.
Dr. Denise Birdwell.
She had to throw the doctor in there.
And I said, wait a second. Is this the Dr. Denise Birdwell that left out the master key that caused Goatgate?
Uh-huh.
Which she acknowledged, yes.
That's funny.
Yeah, so to my surprise, it is Dr. Birdwell.
Okay.
And she's explaining that the Higley High School, specifically, was going through an audit, and this is early fall of 2009. A very disturbing thing came out of this audit that she needs to bring to law enforcement's attention. There appears to be a giant waste of resources happening at the school, and they're not exactly sure just how far it goes yet, but it is definitely criminal in nature. So she starts to explain, we think there's potentially over $1 million worth of damage, which is why it's coming to the violent crimes people. This isn't our typical fraud.
Sure.
And $1 million of taxpayer money. So it's not just the school overspent, it's taxpayer money.
They're not buying too many ice cream bars for lunchtime.
Correct. And that's when she says, have you ever heard of SETI? S-E-T-I, SETI.
It's something extraterrestrial. Did you know that?
I had never heard of SETI. I had no idea. And for those listeners who are like, what is SETI? I need to transition. So we're going to sidebar for just a little bit here, and I'm going to explain SETI because you have to understand what SETI is for this whole story to make sense. SETI, and it sounds very English to me, the SETI Institute. Do it in your accent.
No, I only do that when I've had a few drinks.
SETI, S-E-T-I, is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. It is a nonprofit formed in California in 1984, and it was actually a NASA program. Like many things at NASA, a group of engineers figured out we can do this better and more fiscally responsibly than NASA can. Hey, NASA, let us create this 501c. You can help fund it.
Sure.
We'll give you the research back, but we're going to run this. And it ends up landing at Berkeley. So it ends up landing at UC Berkeley. The idea here is that it's a research think tank, if you will, into clues and evidence about extraterrestrial intelligence. And they examine images and radio frequency that is collected from around the world through these different telescopes and these different big giant satellite dishes.
Like supernovas going off billions of years ago, and there's still sound traveling through the universe to Earth. They're collecting
any type of radio frequency, and they get crazy radio frequency signals. Like, this is actually a big deal. There's a lot of really, really smart scientists that will tell you some of the radio frequencies that have been collected that have arrived on Earth from outer space are signs of actual intelligence. So they do believe there's something
from
here.
A species of some kind. We don't
because
know
there'll be a very specific rhythm or a very specific pattern. And the fact that we don't understand necessarily what's contained in that rhythm or pattern doesn't mean it isn't of an intelligence nature. There's a lot of hubbub about sooner or later we're going to crack this code. The problem is there's so much of it. It's just this massive data collection. And we're pushing, if you think of SETI, it started in 1984. In the mid-90s, they had already collected so much of this. There's no way it could be processed by humans.
Well, it's billions of years of information coming in, right? Constantly.
It is just this massive data dump of all this stuff. So they're trying to figure out, one of SETI's biggest challenges going into the mid to late 90s is how do we don't have supercomputers that can even manage this.
Sure.
So one of the really smart scientists at SETI came up with an idea.
Okay.
The internet will allow us to harness computers around the world.
Okay.
And if we could get hundreds of thousands of computers plugged in through using the internet, we could kind of build the world's largest supercomputer without us spending a dime.
Hence the 501c3, they're using other people to distribute into their profitable database, if you will.
Correct.
Their non-profitable database, I should say.
Yeah, so this is where SETI at Home is born. Okay. And the whole concept from SETI at Home is they developed this really cool program that you can download. You install it in your computer whenever your computer goes to sleep. So if you think about old days, now it's just a static image, but the old screensavers that would come up.
Yeah.
The screensaver would activate the program. So as soon as my screensaver came up, the program would turn on, it would reach out to SETI's database, grab a chunk of data, bring it back, and then use your computer processor to process this data, looking for certain algorithms that would red flag it and say, oh, this one's worth a manual review. Okay. And it would just sit there and crunch data. As soon as I sat back down on my computer, I move the mouse, screensaver stops.
Disappears.
It stops the program.
So they're only collecting from your computer and using your computer's processing power while it's asleep.
Correct.
Okay.
Now you have to have the computer, the internet, the electricity, all of that you fund. And if you think about it, how do you get a couple 100,000 people to be like, yeah, I want to just use my computer?
What does one overnight funding look like for that? Like pennies on the dollar?
Pennies on the dollar. But over time, it could wear down your computer.
Yeah.
So there's a depreciation factor. You have to have decent internet. It's going to eat some of your internet resources. So SETI found themselves in a little bit of a conundrum of how do we get the world to get behind this?
Sure.
And they're brilliant because they're NASA scientists.
Yeah, but you're NASA.
They're NASA. They come up with the first example of online gamification. And what they do is they give you a credit, if you will, which is nothing more than a score.
Sure.
For every hour you process data. And they create this big leaderboard and they make it this big worldwide competition. Who can crunch the most alien data?
And you know people are into that. They love that.
It goes insane. To say that this program was successful is an underreach. Like it absolutely blows up and it creates what will later become known as the Rise of Nez.
Nez. N-E-Z. Okay.
He will become a SETI god. And I'm not joking. This gets out of control.
Okay.
So what happens, this Nez dude, whoever he is, in 2001, downloads the SETI application.
Okay.
You have to go in and create a profile to track your gamification, the leaderboard, and his screen name is Nez, N-E-Z. He very quickly rises to the top monthly producer for SETI. He's cranking out processing hours like nobody's business.
Oh.
Over the next 9 years, Nez is going to rack up 579 million hours of processing.
How does he do that?
We're going to get into that.
That is out of control.
For a lot of people, they don't even think it's possible.
Well, especially in 2001. I was barely figuring out my Gmail account in
We should
2001.
frame this. In 2001, we're saving stuff on floppy disk. Like most computers weren't even rewriting to CDs yet.
No, yeah. Like I said, the internet was still very novel to me then.
Yes. So in 2000, 2003, 2005, how do you process this much? The other thing that was really interesting with Nez is most profiles you could put, oh, I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. You could put a little bio about who you are. You could list, here's the type of computer I'm using. Here's how I built this awesome processor.
Yeah.
Nez hides everything. He hides his location. He shields how many computers he has so people can't see. So this mystery comes up is how is this dude cranking out all these hours?
Yes, it's very alien-like.
And this is exactly what happens. The forums, the blogs go wild with this conspiracy. Nez is an alien.
Oh my gosh.
And Nez is backwards for Zen.
Oh my gosh.
So that's what the screen name means.
Okay.
The forum blog world figured out that Nez is an alien whose spacecraft must have crashed on Earth. He's lost. He's trying to find his way back home. And he's intercepting now through the SETI at Home program all of these RF signals so that he can figure out where he's at and how to get back home.
He's Nez trying to phone home.
He is literally E.T. trying to phone home. And SETI at Home is a perfect portal for him to access this data to figure out where he is.
And eventually be transported back
and
to
how
whatever
do you rack up
universe he's from.
575 million hours? you use extraterrestrial
intelligence
technology.
And intelligence.
He's using an alien computer. He's also masked his location, but somehow the greater internet has figured out his operations are out of Africa. And I can't figure out why it's Africa, but Africa is where he is. There's some other really interesting thing that comes out of this. A couple of these people have claimed to have met him, to sit down and actually interviewed him.
Oh.
One reported...
In Africa?
They wouldn't release his location because he doesn't want to be known. He's an alien. He's worried what's going to happen.
Sure.
They release, he's like another everyday person. You wouldn't even know if you met him that he is Nez, an alien.
He's probably cloned himself from some human being on Earth.
It wouldn't surprise me. We could find that in the forums. It was reported he does like beer and he's not picky on the brand.
Oh.
However, it was also reported that the alcohol concentration in the beer back at his home planet was much higher than Earth beer. So he also prefers to put a shot of vodka in his beer.
Oh, this guy's a lush.
The next little conspiracy that kicks out is very interesting.
Okay.
They accuse Nez of being homosexual.
Oh, okay.
And there's this big gay conspiracy that comes out with Nez.
Okay.
But then some of the smarter forum and blog users point out, we don't even know what sex Nez is. So how can he be homosexual?
Yeah. It was LGBTQ like way ahead of its time.
I hope that this sounds as stupid as I felt reading through all this. There are forums
It's the
after
beer
forums
conspiracy
after
that gets to me.
Well, and I'm not joking. To this day, you can Google Nez, and this is where SETI blew up, is this giant conspiracy of this alien godlike creature that was using extraterrestrial technology far ahead of anything NVIDIA's ever done. Right? Like, it's incredible about the supercomputer. So that's a little bit of background on the SETI program, SETI at Home. And, you know,
And
adding some fuel to the fire is a lot of these posts, when you log in, there's a little, you're live. And people would see Nez logged in. So they know he's reading all these stories about him, but he would never respond. So he's clearly taking extreme efforts to hide and conceal himself. There's actual calls up to some potential legislation that SETI needs to start vetting their at-home users so that we don't have aliens breaking into the system.
Oh my gosh.
And to put this on a little bit of a scale for people, some of the top producers on the gamification, the leaderboard at this point, were doing about 1,000 hours a month because they had multiple machines running.
About how many machines do you think you'd need to run at 1,000 hours a month at that time?
You could do it with a couple of computers, maybe 3 or 4, pretty easily. Nez was racking up about 5 million hours per month.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's crazy. So he becomes this SETI god.
And how many computers do you think you'd need to do that at that time?
5,000 at least. Maybe
Oh my
more, probably
gosh.
closer to 7,000.
Okay.
We'll get into that. For those of you who are getting ready to go log into SETI and download SETI at Home, they discontinued it. They no longer use it. Modern technology has drastically improved our processing ability, so we don't have to do this anymore.
And the way we speak with alien life.
Right. All right. So let's go back to our story, back to Higley High School, this audit in 2009 that revealed this very troubling finding of financial issues.
Okay.
And what they found is in the summer months, when the school was shut down, no students, no teachers, electric bill skyrocketed. Internet usage through the roof. This led for them to look a little bit further. During school, at night, usage through the roof.
Okay.
Internet usage through the roof. Whenever students weren't in the school, the computer labs were working 10 times harder than they had ever worked before.
It's the best place for an alien to hide.
We might have just found Nez's lair.
Oh.
So if the school is running 24/7, all the computers, Higley High School has 5,000 computers in all of their computer labs.
Oh, this is like geeky IT kid.
They find Nez's lair, and I promise you, it's not as sexy as it first sounded.
Oh my gosh.
The director of IT for the Higley School District is an individual known as Brad Niesluchowski.
Niesluchowski.
N-E-I-S, not N-E-Z. But Brad's nickname all through school and growing up in his whole life is it's really hard to say Niesluchowski, so everybody calls Brad
Nez. And this is probably a guy, I'm imagining, who grew up kind of hiding himself throughout school as well. And he's
He
probably
is a
very
total
good at
space geek. He is over the top space geek.
this. Okay.
He is also the #1 producer at SETI at Home, courtesy to the Arizona taxpayers. Arizona taxpayers have been funding an incredible amount of SETI research through Brad's work. So Brad had the ability to set up basically an image So any computer that ever came into Higley High School for any reason gets this image of all the programs.
Okay.
He embedded the SETI at home into that image and then spread it to all 5,000 computers throughout the district.
Probably as the schools were going up as well with brand new computers coming in.
He was also consulting for multiple other districts where he was doing the same image.
Oh my gosh.
So we know that Higley had 5,000 computers. We don't know how many other computers through this other consultations that he was doing. He did the same thing with.
Wow.
So Brad's got some issues. Based on the 575 million hours of work time, more general estimates from experts who've reviewed, hey, how much of an actual financial impact has Brad caused? They think he had this on at least 7,400 computers.
Oh my goodness. Just processing nonstop when kids weren't at school.
In the summer, 24/7, and that's where people were noticing, why does Brad go up? Well, Nez, why is Nez so much higher in the summer?
And on spring break.
Yeah. And they were all kinds of other alien conspiracies for that. So we have to do a search warrant at this point at Brad. And this is the most depressing search warrant in the world. We've talked about some of our prior exploits, but like good SWAT search warrants, you're blowing the door off the hinges, flashbangs are going, guns are out. Like it's just this crazy high octane thing. Then you go to some space geek's house. Like you got to push R2-D2 model over to get to his computer, and he's just in the corner sad because he's going to jail for.
And there's a Chewbacca doll in the background.
Yeah, it was the most depressing search warrant I've ever done.
Well, you sound like an FBI agent now.
That's why it's depressing. 18 computers recovered from the house as well. 18 school computers. He started building his own little mini supercomputer at home.
Okay.
And he had all kinds of crazy processing going on that. Dr. Birdwell does a press release about this after we start to figure it out, and she gets skewered. Space Geeks United. She explains this giant waste of Arizona taxpayer dollars. And then she kind of makes a little bit of a fumble. And she says, if it was researched into cancer, we could understand. But this alien nonsense. And the Space Geeks came after. And if Revenge of the Nerds has taught us anything, what do we learn?
Yeah, you don't mess with a nerd.
You don't let them.
Nerds
don't let them unite. Correct.
Yeah.
And she united the Space Geeks across the world, and she got completely skewered.
Yeah.
I'm going to hand this case off because, quite frankly, I don't care.
Okay.
I'm all about people finding alien shit, but it's just not my bag. So I'm done with this case. I don't know what happens to it. I'm out. I did hear later on that there is an estimate of $1.6 million in damages between internet consumption, depreciation of the computers from working so hard,
which would
the electricity.
Definitely become a felony offense.
It is a felony at this point. This is where another conspiracy in our last crime starts to come to light.
Okay.
Dr. Birdwell starts hiring some close associates to look into this matter. And there's a lot of hubbub about this 1.6 million and money that was spent investigating this. Never really goes anywhere, but if you just Google it, it comes up. But I'm really curious if that starts the next audit at the Higley Unified School District.
Because they're not just going to be looking at the IT budget. They're looking at other line items of the budget.
This opens up a bunch of different doors.
Okay.
And Higley, you brought it up, one of the fastest growing school districts in America. What does school districts need when they grow fast? New schools. The construction around new schools is multi-million dollar projects each time. It appears Dr. Birdwell had devised this plan where she would put out to bid new construction projects. People would respond to those bids. She would sit on this 3-person panel to decide which construction company would get the bid. She would make sure that a particular construction company got the bid, and they would give her kickbacks to the tune of well over $500,000 worth of kickbacks.
And, it's so funny you're saying this because a lot of the schools in the Higley School District are the ugliest schools I've ever seen. I'm not kidding. They look like a detention facility. They're so ugly. Thanks, Denise.
Now, I have to say, Dr. Birdwell is innocent until proven guilty, so I'm not saying she did anything wrong.
Okay.
But there appears to be quite a bit of evidence that there's something going on at Higley School District. She ends up leaving Higley School District and moves to the Scottsdale School District, which is even bigger, a lot more money, and there's some similar claims now coming out of Scottsdale School District. So she's being investigated for that as well. In 2001, the Arizona Attorney General released an 18-count indictment against Denise Birdwell.
Oh my gosh.
For all kinds of fraud, misrepresentation,
mismanagement
kickbacks,
of funds, taxpayer funds at that.
There is some taxpayer stuff. And she claims that her partner / she's a caregiver for this other lady who's an attorney who was also involved. And it's fishy. It's a mess.
Does sound shady.
Yeah. And she's actually looking at potentially some serious time over this. The case is ongoing. A couple of her co-defendants have either pled out or have taken some type of a plea deal. But she has more charges than anybody else. She's the one that's really on the hook for this. And who knows? It may came out that she did nothing wrong, but it's not looking good for Dr. Birdwell.
Doubtful.
Right. All going back to SETI.
Interesting.
Yeah, kind of an interesting. Yeah, see, that was a fun story.
I guess back to what we were saying about Nez. Did she not file charges on Nez because it would cause further digging into some of her nefarious activity with the budget?
No, she was all about getting Nez to go to jail. Nez resigned shortly after this, so they didn't have to fire him. I think there was an initial push to file some criminal charges, and there's a great chance it probably happened. But I don't think Nez ever did jail time or anything like that. I think he probably had some pretty serious fines.
Sure.
That, he's probably got some financial issues over this, but overall, like, nobody went to jail or anything crazy like that.
Right. So he's probably still paying into the lunch fund at Higley School District somewhere.
Probably had to sell like his R2-D2 doll and the Chewbacca mask, like all that stuff. Had to
eBay.
go to auction.
I think eBay was out then.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, that's a fun story. So lesson is, don't use your employer's computers to play games and be on leaderboards.
Especially if it's the government that you work for.
Yeah. If it's
you'll get away with it for 9 years, but when it finally does come to head, it's going to be a mess.
Yeah, don't do anything nefarious when it's funded by taxpayer dollars. Well, join us next week, socialites, for a heavier episode called Graduation Day. Stay safe.
Sunday morning, 4 a.m., Deborah wakes up to the sound of like a loud pop. She sees Lindsay and she literally can't believe what she's seeing. It's a 15-year-old girl who had her whole life in front of her. They found that the state hospital isn't reporting different types of deaths when it comes to suicide and homicide.
It's the perfect place to release a serial killer.
There's a very clear narrative of what happened, and they investigate the crime scene to confirm that narrative, instead of investigating the crime scene to just see what they can discover and let the evidence speak for itself. 14 years after he arrived, the board decides it's time to release him.